morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, having been to East Africa and Southeast Asia, I'm now going to bring you home to Scotland. As I say, what we do is, what we see on the can, we're looking to produce gold in Scotland. We're probably, in terms of the corporate development, I'm somewhere between the last two presentations you've seen. We are putting our first project into operation, but obviously exploration in the future is where we're at. I have presented here before, so I think some of you are familiar with the story. It's not going to be a nuts and bolts in terms of the financials tonight, but I just wanted to give you a good feel for what is actually physically happening down there on the site. I'll go through the disclaimer. Basically, we've got two main legs to our company. The first is the Cononish project. It's been around for a while, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. It's going to be a very high-grade, low-cost producer, and that will become very cash generative. But the future for us is, our ambition is to produce have a gold mining industry in Scotland, and so this is only the first step, and this will be the enabling step to fund our future exploration activities and hopefully find more mines. So we want to spend a bit of time on that as well this evening. So this is just basically the Cononish numbers. I think, as was alluded to, Ashante, if one looks at average gold prices gold grades, around the world, you're looking at 1.5 gram a ton. We're sitting at a resource grade of 14.8 and a head grade, that's after dilution and mining, of 11.7. So we're extremely high grade, but we are very small. We're on the micro scale. We've got a resource of some 200,000 ounces. So it gives us about an 8 or 9 year mine life at full production. So high grade, low cost operation. It has been a long road to get to where we've got to, and this is for a number of factors. Scotland, we believe, is extremely well endowed with potential for gold, and the project we've got, as I said, is high grade. One would think it would be a no-brainer to get going. However, we've got two major challenges. The first is our scale. The fact that we are micro scale means that the normal financing for gold type operations hasn't necessarily been available to us. As I say, we were looking originally for financing the order of 20-25 million. As we heard earlier, a more conventional sort of medium scale gold operation, we're looking for sort of 10 times that, 200 to 300 million. So that sort of puts us in a sort of slightly unique niche market for where to find the financing. And secondly, a project like this, going from a junior, a developer, someone who owns it and wants to put it into production, is quite a hard road. And quite often, this sort of project would be funded by a senior who then wants to buy it out, put the money in, and take it forward. In our case, because although we're very high grade and low cost, we don't have the big numbers in terms of ounces produced every year that's going to move the dial for the big boys. So there hasn't been a lot of interest in big players moving into Scotland. So we think we're in a fairly unique niche market. We've cracked it in terms of getting this project funded. We're halfway through the development now, which we'll come on to. And once we're up and running and we start producing the cash flow from that, we are then masters of our own destiny in terms of funding future exploration and future mines from that. So just as a little bit of a schematic of what the ore body looks like, it's a quartz-hosted near vertical geothermal vein. It's basically sitting in the side of a hill. It's like a slice of ham running through the middle of the side of the hill. There's an exploration adit, which is basically a tunnel running in the side of the hill, which was put in late 89 to 91. What we're doing at the moment is we're busy enlarging that, but essentially all the drilling has been up to the top of the hill, which is about 160 meters and 80 meters below. So all our data essentially is in that area, and that's where our resource is. So there's a big question as to what happens at depth. Does it continue at depth? We just don't know. It hasn't been drilled. Or does it continue along strike? And this is one of the other things we'll come on to in a minute on the exploration side. And the question is, well, why don't we just drill it off and find more? And the answer is because we have a single vein. Mining is a case of matching equipment and machinery to the ore body you have. If you've got an ore body which is one single vein, you have only a limited number of access points to it. and therefore there's an optimum scale you can mine this at. You know, you can't put so many people in one hole and expect them to produce an infinite amount of material. So we settled on an optimal extraction rate of 72,000 tonnes per annum, and on that basis, we have an 8-year mine life. So if whatever else we find here is probably not going to enable us to increase the production rate, but it's going to add to life of mine. And just because the world is hung up on discounted cash flows and NPVs, you know, all that revenue in 8 or 9 years' time, thereafter doesn't really count for very much when you discount it back to today's money. But going forward, that's where the future of the mine will lay. So this cash cow, once we get up and we start exploring and finding more, we're very confident will extend. So coming on to what's actually happening, in terms of Cononish Gold Mine, the project itself, there's 3 major elements to bringing this mine into production. The first is the mining, because we have to get in and get the ore gold out. The second is the building of the processing plant, so we have to have a building. It's in a very picturesque Cononish glen, steep-sided. There's a lot of complex earthworks to actually put the infrastructure in place. And the third leg is actually built supplying the machinery that's going to actually take the gold out. So starting off with the mining. And this is what the mine used to look like. So this is the adit that extends for a kilometre right through the middle of the hill. So developed 89 to 91. It was developed with little tracks that went in here, sort of, dare I say it, sort of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs type thing. They pushed the little cars in on those tracks, they loaded them in, brought them out and tipped them on the side of the hill. Going forward, we obviously have just sort of thought we can do something slightly better than that. So we are using modern trackless equipment. It'll be a long hole open stope mine. But to do that, to get in, this has to be made bigger. So it's about 2.4 by 2.4 at the moment, and it's going to 3.4 by 3.4. So that is it now. It's now being enlarged, supported around the outside, and we're working our way in. And the key point to remember is in terms of timelines, this is critical path because you can only advance by 1 blast per day, and you have to go through a blasting cycle. So that means basically that's the original tunnel. We drill new holes, blast that down, and carry on. So you've got to drill and blast, you muck it out, you then bring the broken rock out with a tipper, with a truck. All this machinery is all on site. This is all our full phase 1 production machinery. That then gets tipped out of the side. This rock actually is going to be used in the construction of the building and the tailings, which I'll come on to a bit later. So this is only a temporary storage of that waste rock. After you've mucked out, you then support, special drill rig for the support, and then you're back to the beginning again, drill and blast. So because that's a cycle and you've got to get in 1,000 kilometres, we started that on day 1. Essentially, we got permit to start in 18th December 2018. 2nd of January, we were going to start on the 1st, we decided maybe it'd better start on the 2nd. 2nd of January, the guys started. We've got all new crews, they're all locally employed people. We've gone from a situation sort of 4 years ago where I was the only employee. We've now got 25 people, 2 crews working 12-hour shifts, blasting this every day. So coming on to the surface infrastructure, which is just a second leg. Firstly, there's a certain amount of infrastructure which is sort of for our benefit and the community. We've put up a new bridge. We've done a big widening of the road accesses to the place. We've enlarged the car park so that our personnel don't hog all the car parking which is available for people using the West Highland Way and other public facilities. But the big challenge for us has been the platform to build the process plant on. What you can see here is we're basically doing it's a cut and fill. So you're cutting out the side of the hillside here. It's going to be filled on that side. There'll be a bund on there, and then the building will sit in this area here. So as we go, we are effectively cutting here. This is peat and turf which is being cut. This peat and turf gets cut, and it gets immediately put and restored and placed on the exposed embankment above. So this whole thing is like a game of Tetris. So we're not just in there digging it all out and then saying, well, that's what we got and we'll worry about restoring it later. As we go, we're exposing an area. We have the very first area went onto a little stockpile. Thereafter, every bit of turf goes directly onto its home. So it's very environmentally friendly and very closely regulated by the parks. That's just a picture of the portal. These were two old existing mine buildings which will stay there in long term, and so the new big building will be sitting down below us here. This is a sort of a computer-generated graphic of what it will look like. As I say, we have to make these yellow so you can actually see them, but the end result is that these will become the same as everything else. This is a building, it's a substantial building, 80 by 30. The idea is that everything is pretty well contained in that. So all the machinery is in that, all the lighting in that. We don't have any windows facing down the glen, letting out light pollution and all those types of things. This is then a sort of another generated picture of what the mine will look like when it's finished. You've got the mine up there itself. This will be rehabilitated, so you won't see that grey scar at all. These slightly darker areas you won't be able to see at all either, but they're there to show you where they'll be. These are our tailing stacks. So we don't have a conventional tailing storage facility. What we have is a dry stack system. So our tailings, basically the rock comes out of the ground, it goes to the processing plant, which I'll show you in a minute. It comes out and ends up as damp sand. That damp sand then gets taken out, built into these stacks. We're building approximately one stack a year. So you build the stack, you rehabilitate it, then you move on to the next stack. So it's a progressive thing. There's nothing to retain. There's no risk of failure, and there's nothing inert. Everything is totally inert, nothing nasty in it. So coming on to the processing plant, it's just a bit of what I was describing you. Basically, what you start at this end, we have a crushing circuit. It goes through a classification into a ball mill. From the ball mill, it goes through a float circuit. From the float circuit, it goes to the press. The concentrate is taken off here. We take off a concentrate product from the float. We take off a small amount of 25% of gold comes out as gravity gold, which comes out of the circuit here. Some of you may have seen that we do actually supply the Scottish gold jewellery industry. So I've got a piece here from Hamilton and Inches I'm wearing from our first trial. So all our gold is certificated to have come from this mine, goes through the Edinburgh Assay Office and then through the jewellers and then back to the office and gets a hallmark. So that's the gold that comes out of that gravity circuit there. The bulk of the gold comes out as a float circuit. That comes out, gets bagged, and will go off in a truck daily to a refiner, probably in Europe somewhere. And then the tailings comes out, is filtered out, comes out, and that's your pile of damp sand, which then gets taken with your Tonka toys down the valley and the stacks built. That's just a picture of the ball mill. You've got a man there for scale. He is Chinese, so I'm not quite sure how tall he is, but that's our ball mill. Our crusher rather. All this equipment is in country now. We got about a quarter of it is actually on site. We're doing pre-assembly, waiting for the building to be ready. The rest of it is sitting in a yard up at Grangemouth, ready to be shipped up. So coming on to the exciting stuff, which is the exploration. Just I'll quickly whiz through this. This is about 800 years of history here. 800 million years, sorry. Once upon a time when the world looked slightly different, and we had all these tectonics going on. There's a band which runs all the way from sort of Scandinavia through to North America, which is the Dalradian belt, and it's basically created by a lot of sediments on the seabed, which have all been pushed up and folded, and as a result, the structures and fractures in that have created opportunities. So, if one looks at what the geology consists of, it's metasediments with a lot of intrusives coming through, and so these structures resulting from the folding and the faulting is what creates the alleyways, A for these intrusives, B for fluids which bring the gold through. So looking at within Scotland, or within the UK, you've got ourselves here up at Cononish, you've got Dalradian Resources and Galantis with their deposits in Northern Ireland. So we're all on this same belt. In terms of what the land package that we own, the way it works in the UK is that nearly all mineral rights belong to the Crown. We've now devolved the Crown Estate, so that we now work with the Crown Estate Scotland, and the Crown Estate Scotland owns the mineral rights, and we have options agreements to explore on this land, these areas, which if we find something and get it into a development stage and get planning for, we then have the right to get a mining lease for. So that's the way it works. So as you can see, we have probably got the lion's share of the best material here, best ground here in Scotland. In terms of how we approach this, part of the problem Scotland has is it's quite hilly, some of you might have noticed, and that makes exploration quite expensive in terms of we can't just drive around with a rig on the back of a truck and poke holes where we want to. If you look at it on a map and think it'd be nice to put a hole here, when you're going to look in the field, you've got to get a helicopter to lift your rig up onto the top of some ven. So it is expensive. As a result, it's relatively underexplored. And so what we have done historically is compiled a lot of stream sediment data. There's been public available data through the BGS. And then we use a weighting system to say, well, BGS says it should be good. Our field samples weren't so good. We'll rate one against the other. And when you end up combining all those factors, you end up with a prospectivity map. And this area, so there's Cononish here. This is what we call the sort of Glenorchy triangle. This is where we have the most data. And you can see there is quite a density of what we believe to be good prospects. But we weren't very happy with the system because we felt there's a lot of subjectivity in it, and therefore we were looking for something better. And what we've come up with is a system for what they call ionic leach, which basically means instead of taking, as we traditionally would have taken a sample of that soil, and then we'd have ground it to bug dust and analysed how much gold was in it, and say, well, that must represent, presumably if there had been an ore body there might be some gold left in it to show what's going on. Now, what we do is we're taking a soil sample, but all we're looking at is the ions which are attached to those mineral particles, those soil particles. So what you're looking for is actually ions which have been transported from an ore body potentially below you towards surface. And strange as it may sound, we thought, well, this is a relatively new technique. I mean, how do we know whether it works or not? And so the test was, well, let's do it over Cononish, because we know there is an ore body there. Let's do it and see what it looks like. So, but before we did that, we basically do it in two ways. We do drainage sampling, which is to look at within river basins, and so you can see where the rivers come from. So if you test all the rivers, you can then identify an area. If there's anomalies, there must be a gold source within that catchment area of that drainage. Secondly is to investigate using soil sampling, and then carrying on further is geophysical and ultimately drilling. At the moment, we're still really doing these two stages because we are cash flow constrained. I mean, basically the idea is to get the mine up and running, and that will generate the cash, which will enable us to move this way in our well-known areas, and to sort of start doing this on a much broader scale on all our land package that we have. So just the results to date. This is the Cononish. This is a drain sampling. So you see Cononish came up with quite a nice drain anomaly over the ore body, but we found a much bigger one over that Benuli, which is one of our previously identified anomalies. This is the soil sampling, over Cononish. That's over the Cononish itself. And what we found is we've identified these other areas which we weren't aware of, which also look very promising. So not only has it shown Cononish, but it's shown some more, which, these would be the sort of places we'd also be drilling to look for extra ore to expand the life of the Cononish mine. These were two prospects which we thought might look good, but they don't look quite so promising, look fairly constrained. What has come out though is we had one or two very high-grade samples historically here, so we used some students to go and have a look at that, and you apply these techniques, and what they found is a very, very good soil anomaly here, and when we look at the soil catchment, it's got a tremendous footprint from the soils. So obviously the next target is to roll out this soil sampling all down here and find out where this stretches to. So that's looking exceedingly exciting. So in terms of our guiding principles, I mean, we're a small company, but we are operating in a national park. We are, I believe, and I've been in the industry many, many years, it's one of the most prescriptive and highly managed and inspected, monitored regimes I've come across. And so it's a badge of honour for us to actually to do it. And our whole future depends on us doing it well. Because if we don't get this one right, we're not going to get a chance anywhere else. If we get it right, it opens all sorts of doors for us. Because if you can do it there, we can do it anywhere. So we do have a resident bat. We have a man who comes and inspect it called Robin. He also has a little. He also has his very own little tunnel. I think he's got the most desirable des res any bat in the country. So we blasted a specific tunnel for him. We also have a badger cam. We have our own badger cam. So we have with the free to roam, right to roam in Scotland, people can come and go as they want generally. Because we are an operating mine for safety reasons, we're allowed to fence off our area, but then we have to look at what animals and whatever are moving backwards and forwards between our fenced area and others. So when we find something like this, we now have specific arrangements for a little badger door for him to come in and out and so forth. So that's just an example of the sort of lengths we are going to. So final thoughts. We're only months away now from our first mine being producing, high grade, low cost. The exploration around Cononish is looking promising. We'll get into that, and that will build the length of life of that mine. And then lastly, the Grampian project is showing some fantastic potential, and we've really only scratched the surface of the whole area we've got to explore. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
You used to be a dual-listed company, and I know you've given your ASX listing up.
Yes.
But you're still an Australian-registered company.
Yes.
Does that give you any advantages, and do you have any ambitions to become a UK-listed company, a registered company?
We're not, as you say, jurisdiction-wise, we are Australian, which means we have to operate under Australian company law. It also means we have to have 2 Australian directors. We have to have an Australian company secretary. So we have one of our Australian directors has a plaque on his lounge. That's our registered office in Australia. So there's some bureaucracy that goes with being Australian domiciled. It would be much simpler and probably better for us to be UK domiciled. We've looked at it. There's probably the issue is we are currently listed on AIM. If we were to change and top hat it, put it into another company, we would have to re-admit all our assets onto AIM. So the estimates are it's anywhere up to £500,000 in legal fees to re-domicile. So from our perspective, we'll live with the Australian thing. It's more of a nuisance than anything else. It would be nicer if we didn't have it. Maybe one day if an M&A or something came along and we could roll it out, then we'd wrap it up. So if we could, we'd wrap it up, but we're happy to live with it. We don't want to fork out £500,000 now on legal fees.
Hi Richard, you spoke earlier of the possibility of further mines. Have you had any further discussions with the local authorities going forward on this?
Not specifically on the mine. I mean, our planning permit is very specific to the tonnage we've got. So we're permitted for 550,000 tonnes. So for Cononish itself, when we find extensions to that, we'll then go back and get a variation to planning permission. We had the board of the planning parks up on site. They understand where we're at and they're very happy with that. From the Crown Estate's perspective, they're very supportive of us getting this mine up and running because that then adds value to all the other land in Scotland, because people say, well, if Scotgold could do it at Cononish, why can't anybody else do it? So we expect a wave of renewed interest in exploration. And going forward for a new mine, I mean, we've done a lot of hard work with Cononish, so in the national park. 85% of our land is actually outside the national park. So if we had to do another one inside the national park, it would be a lot easier. If we had to do another one outside the national park, it would be infinitely easier.
At the moment, you're selling the gold from the BPT was sold to 2 jewellers, and you announced that was being sold at 30% profit above spot gold. How many more inquiries have you had from that, or is he just going to base that on the 2 jewellers you've got, or are you going to expand it?
Well, we're in discussions with the 2 jewellers, this Hamilton Inches and Sheila Fleet, that we supplied to from a little processing trial. They are gagging for more. They both put a lot of money into their marketing. They've sold just about everything that we supplied to them or have orders for it. So they're very keen to get more gold out of it and get the gold when we start into production proper. Longer term, we want to broaden it out, but we won't do that in haste. We'll take some time because we want to support those people who've put their investment into it and have done the marketing to date, and they've been very supportive of the project. So we'll continue to supply for them in the short term. Longer term, we'll look to expanding it maybe setting up some form of Scottish Gold Board or whatever to ensure distribution around the jewellers within Scotland.
Great. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Richard. Thank
thank
you
you.
for that.